The doctor say I cannot be able to see for some time. Please handle the company for now.
I understand. Don't worry, I will.
Clara was not just rich, she was powerful. In the heart of a fast-growing city, her name carried weight like thunder before the rain. She built her empire from nothing but courage, sleepless nights, and a mind sharper than a blade. Every building that touched the sky, every company that thrived in silence, whispered her name. Yet behind all the wealth, Clara carried a quiet fear, the fear of being loved for her money, not her soul. Her home was large, filled with beauty and gold, but often empty of truth. Servants moved like shadows, and laughter rarely stayed long. The only person she believed she could trust was her husband, Daniel Whitmore. He was gentle, calm, and always knew the right words to say. To the world, they were the perfect couple. But deep inside Clara, a small voice kept asking, "Does he love me, or my fortune?" Daniel Whitmore was a man many admired. He dressed well, spoke softly, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that made people trust him instantly. Before Clara, he was just another man trying to survive in a hard world. But after marrying her, his life changed overnight. Wealth surrounded him. Comfort followed him. Doors opened without effort. But Daniel had secrets buried deep within him, secrets he hid behind his warm smile. Sometimes, when Clara wasn't looking, his eyes would change. They would grow cold, calculating. He loved the life he lived, but whether he truly loved Clara was something only his heart knew, and his heart was not easy to read. One evening, as the sun slowly disappeared and darkness filled the sky, Clara sat alone in her room. The silence pressed against her chest like a heavy weight. That small voice in her mind had grown louder. It refused to rest. "I need to know the truth," she whispered. The next morning, Clara called Daniel into her room. Her eyes were covered with a soft cloth, and her voice trembled slightly. "Daniel, I can't see clearly anymore," she said. "The doctors say I may lose my sight for a while." Daniel froze for a moment, then rushed to her side. "Clara, this can't be true," he said, holding her hands. "I need you," she continued. "Please take over the company until I get better." Daniel hesitated, but only for a second. "Of course," he replied gently. "I will take care of everything." Clara lowered her head slightly, hiding the sharp awareness in her eyes. Because Clara was not blind. She was watching everything. Days passed, and the house changed. Daniel began leaving early in the morning, dressed in expensive suits, carrying the authority Clara once held. He spoke less, smiled less, and stayed out longer. Clara, pretending to struggle with her blindness, moved slowly through the house, guided by memory instead of sight. But her ears were sharp. She heard whispers. She noticed changes. The servants spoke less freely around her. Doors closed quickly when she approached. And at night, Daniel's voice carried a tone she had never heard before, cold, distant, unfamiliar. Clara's heart tightened. Something was changing. Something was wrong. One afternoon, Clara heard the front door open. She sat quietly in the living room, her head slightly tilted as if trying to listen harder than usual. Footsteps entered the house, 2 sets, not one. "Be quiet," Daniel whispered sharply. A soft female voice replied, "Relax, she can't see anything." Clara's fingers tightened against the arm of her chair. Her heart began to beat faster. "Clara," Daniel called out loudly, his voice suddenly warm again. "I brought someone to help around the house. Her name is Sophia. She will assist you while you recover." Clara turned her head slowly, pretending to search for the voice. "Thank you," she said softly. But inside, something broke. Because Clara knew that voice, that careless confidence. Sophia was no maid. Sophia was a stranger who walked in like she owned the place. From that day, the house no longer felt like Clara's home. Sophia moved freely, laughing loudly, speaking without respect. She would walk close to Daniel, her voice playful, her tone bold. Clara could hear everything, the soft touches, the whispered jokes, the silence that followed. One evening, Clara sat quietly as they thought she was asleep. "Are you sure she doesn't know?" Sophia asked. Daniel chuckled softly. "She's blind, Sophia. She can't even see her own hands." Clara's chest burned, but her face remained calm. Sophia laughed. "Good. Because I'm getting tired of pretending." Clara clenched her fist under the blanket. Her heart was breaking, but her mind was growing stronger. Though Clara walked like a blind woman, she saw everything. She saw how Daniel now sat in her chair, the chair of power. She saw how Sophia wore expensive clothes that once belonged to her. She saw the betrayal in every corner of her home. But Clara did not react. She waited. She listened. She learned. Because Clara was no ordinary woman. She was patient. And patience, she knew, was the sharpest weapon. One night, as rain poured heavily outside, Clara heard something different. Fear. Daniel's voice was not calm anymore. "Are you sure about this?" he asked Sophia. "Yes," Sophia replied. "If she never sees again, everything becomes yours. And mine." Clara's breath caught. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest. "Then we must be careful," Daniel said quietly. "We can't make mistakes." Clara slowly turned her face toward the sound, her eyes wide open in the darkness. For the first time, she felt something deeper than pain. She felt danger. Clara lay awake that night, staring into the darkness. Tears rolled down her face, but they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of awakening. The man she trusted, the man she loved, was no longer the man she knew. And the woman in her house was not just a stranger, she was a threat. But Clara was not helpless. She was watching. She was planning. And soon, she would act. Morning came quietly, but something had changed. Clara sat at the dining table, calm and composed. Daniel walked in, surprised to see her already seated. "You're up early," he said. Clara smiled faintly. "Yes," she replied. "I feel different today." Daniel studied her face for a moment, then looked away. But Clara noticed everything. Because though she wore the face of a blind woman, her eyes were wide open. And a storm was coming, the morning air felt heavy, like something unseen was watching. Clara sat quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. She had made a decision. No more waiting without action. If Daniel and Sophia were planning something dark, then she would move fast, but carefully, like a hunter in tall grass. Later that day, she called one of her oldest and most trusted staff members, Mr. Lewis, into her room. He had worked with her long before Daniel came into her life. His loyalty was not bought, it was earned through years of trust. "Mr. Lewis," Clara said softly, still acting blind, "I need you to help me with something," quietly. Mr. Lewis leaned closer. "Anything, madam." Clara paused, then lowered her voice. "Watch everything. Say nothing to anyone, especially my husband." Mr. Lewis stiffened slightly. He understood. Something was wrong. Mr. Lewis moved like a shadow after that day. He watched who entered the house. He observed Daniel's movements. He listened without being seen. And what he discovered began to trouble him deeply. Daniel was not just managing the company, he was changing things. Important documents were being moved. Certain accounts were being accessed without proper records. And some of Clara's most trusted board members were being quietly removed. One evening, Mr. Lewis returned to Clara's room. "Madam," he said carefully, "things are not as they should be." Clara sat still, her face calm. "I know," she replied. Mr. Lewis hesitated. Do you want me to inform the authorities? Clara slowly shook her head. No. Not yet. Her lips tightened slightly. Let them continue. That same week, Daniel held a private meeting at the company. He sat at the head of the table, a position that once belonged to Clara. His posture had changed. His voice carried authority now, strong, firm, almost unrecognizable. We need faster growth, Daniel said. We will make decisions without delay. I am now in charge. Some of the board members exchanged uneasy glances. Where is Mrs. Whitmore? One of them asked. Daniel smiled calmly. She is recovering. I speak for her. But not everyone was convinced. Outside the room, Mr. Lewis stood quietly, listening. His eyes narrowed. Something bigger was happening, and it was dangerous. Back at home, Clara continued her act perfectly. She moved slowly, counted her steps, and spoke as if she lived in darkness. But in truth, she saw more clearly than ever before. She saw Sophia wearing her jewelry. She saw the way Daniel looked at her, with no respect, no love. She saw the future they were trying to build without her. But Clara was not broken. She was transforming. Like a quiet river that slowly becomes a flood. One night, something unexpected happened. Clara woke up to the faint sound of footsteps outside her door. She stayed still, her breathing slow and controlled. The door creaked open slightly. She heard Sophia's voice, whispering. Are you sure this is safe? Daniel replied quietly, she's asleep. And even if she wakes up, she won't see anything. Clara's heart pounded, but she did not move. Then she heard something that froze her blood. We can't wait too long, Sophia continued. If she regains her sight, everything is over. Daniel's voice dropped lower. Then we make sure she doesn't. Clara's fingers tightened against the bedsheet. In that moment, everything became clear. This was no longer a test of love. This was survival. The next day, Clara did something unexpected. At breakfast, she spoke more confidently. Daniel, she said, how is the company doing? Daniel looked slightly surprised. It's fine, he replied. Everything is under control. Clara nodded slowly. That's good, she said. Because I had a strange dream last night. Daniel paused. What kind of dream? He asked. Clara turned her face toward him, her eyes still pretending not to see. I saw people taking what belongs to me, thinking I would never know. A silence filled the room. Sophia shifted uncomfortably. Daniel forced a small laugh. It's just a dream, Clara. But for the first time, Daniel felt something he had not felt before. Fear. Later that evening, Mr. Lewis returned with something important. A file, he whispered. I found it in the office. Clara took it carefully. Inside were documents, transfers of money, ownership changes, signatures that should not exist. Clara's face remained calm as she flipped through the pages. But inside, a storm was rising. They are trying to take everything, Mr. Lewis said quietly. Clara closed the file slowly. Let them think they are winning, she replied. Her voice was no longer soft. It was sharp. Controlled. Dangerous. Clara began making silent moves. She contacted her lawyer secretly. She reconnected with powerful allies who trusted her. She placed hidden checks on her accounts. And most importantly, she prepared for the moment when truth would be revealed. Because Clara understood something very important. The strongest revenge is not anger. It is timing. Sophia was growing careless. She laughed louder. She acted bolder. One afternoon, she made a mistake. While speaking on the phone, she forgot herself. Yes, she said confidently, everything will soon belong to Daniel. The wife is useless now. Clara stood quietly in the hallway, listening. Her face did not change. But her eyes burned with quiet fire. Because now, she had proof. That night, Clara sat alone in her room. The house was silent. The air felt heavy. She removed the cloth from her eyes slowly and looked around the room. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to see freely. Everything was the same. But nothing felt the same. She stood up slowly, walked to the mirror, and stared at her reflection. "No more waiting," she whispered. Her voice was calm, but filled with power. Because the woman who once tested love was now ready to destroy betrayal. The house was unusually peaceful that morning. Clara sat by the window, her head slightly tilted as if she was listening to the wind. But her mind was far from calm. Every word she had heard, every secret she had uncovered, was now forming a clear path in her thoughts. Daniel walked past her without stopping. That alone told her everything. Before, he would check on her, speak softly, pretend to care. Now, he barely looked at her. His confidence had grown too quickly, like a man who believed he had already won. Clara smiled faintly. That was his first mistake. Later that day, Clara made a surprising announcement. "I want to host a dinner," she said calmly. Daniel stopped mid-step. "A dinner?" "Yes," Clara replied. "For the company. The board members, our partners, everyone." Sophia, who was standing nearby, frowned slightly. "But, in your condition?" she asked. Clara turned her face toward her voice. "I may not see, but I can still lead." Daniel hesitated. Something about this didn't feel right. But refusing would raise suspicion. "All right," he said slowly. "We'll arrange it." Clara nodded. "Make sure everyone important is there." Her lips curved slightly. "Everyone." The house became busy once again. Decorations were arranged. Food was planned. Invitations were sent out. It looked like a celebration, but beneath the surface, something much deeper was being prepared. Mr. Lewis worked quietly behind the scenes. The lawyer Clara contacted had already gathered the necessary documents. Financial records. Ownership proof. Evidence of fraud. Everything was ready. Clara was building a stage. And soon, the truth would perform. Meanwhile, Daniel was making his own plans. In his office, he sat with Sophia, both of them leaning over documents. "Once this is signed," Sophia said, pointing to a paper, "everything becomes yours officially." Daniel nodded slowly. "And her?" he asked. Sophia shrugged. "She's blind. Weak. She won't fight." Daniel leaned back in his chair. For a moment, a shadow crossed his face. "Good," he said quietly. But deep inside, a small voice whispered, "What if you're wrong?" He ignored it. The evening of the dinner came quickly. The house glowed with lights. Expensive cars filled the driveway. Important guests arrived one after another, their voices filling the air with polite laughter. Clara stood at the center of it all, dressed in elegance. Her eyes were still covered. Her movements still careful. But her presence was powerful. Daniel watched her closely. Something about her felt different. Stronger. Unshaken. And for the first time, he felt uneasy. The dinner went smoothly at first. Guests ate, drank, and spoke about business. Daniel played his role well, acting like the perfect leader. Sophia moved around confidently, almost like she belonged there. Then, Clara slowly stood up. The room quieted. "I want to say something," she began. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the room with ease. I may have lost my sight, but I have not lost my understanding. A few guests exchanged glances. Daniel stiffened slightly. Clara continued. Sometimes, when you cannot see, you begin to hear more clearly. You begin to feel the truth. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Clara lifted her hand slowly. Mr. Lewis, she said. He stepped forward immediately. Please bring the file. Daniel's heart skipped. What file? He asked, trying to sound calm. Clara turned her face toward him. You see. Mr. Lewis handed her the documents. Clara held them gently, then spoke. These papers show changes in ownership. Transfers of money. Decisions made without my consent. Murmurs spread across the room. Daniel forced a laugh. This is ridiculous. Clara, you don't understand. Enough, Clara said sharply. The room froze. That word. That tone. It was not the voice of a weak woman. It was the voice of power. Slowly, Clara reached up and removed the cloth from her eyes. Gasps filled the room. Daniel stepped back. Sophia's face went pale. Clara opened her eyes fully and looked directly at them. I see everything, she said. Silence. Deep. Shocking. You lied to me. You betrayed me. You tried to take everything I built. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. Sophia stood frozen. Clara stepped forward, her gaze sharp. And the worst part. Her voice dropped slightly. You thought I was weak. The room erupted into whispers. Board members looked at Daniel with suspicion. Some stepped away from him entirely. Clara raised the documents. These are copies, she said. The originals are already with my lawyer. Daniel's legs felt weak. You planned this, he whispered. Clara looked at him without emotion. No, she replied. You created this. Security quietly moved closer. The power in the room had shifted completely. And Daniel knew it. Sophia suddenly stepped forward. This is not fair, she shouted. You tricked us. Clara turned to her slowly. No, she said calmly. I revealed you. Sophia's confidence shattered. Daniel tried one last time. Clara, we can fix this, he said. Clara stared at him. For a long moment. Then shook her head. No. Her voice was quiet. But final. Because some betrayals do not deserve forgiveness. The room was dead silent. Clara's words hung like a storm cloud over everyone. Daniel could barely breathe, and Sophia looked like a child caught in a lie she could never undo. Clara stood tall, her eyes sharp, unwavering. I gave you trust, she said. I gave you everything. And you tried to take it from me, my company, my life, my heart. Daniel swallowed hard. His words failed him. For the first time, he realized he had underestimated the woman he thought was blind. Clara had not only seen the truth, she had anticipated every move. The board members, once silent, began whispering among themselves. They had suspected Daniel's recent maneuvers but feared confrontation until now. Clara raised a hand. Everyone here has seen the proof. These people, she pointed at Daniel and Sophia, tried to steal from the company, from me. The original documents are already with my lawyers. Their access is revoked, effective immediately. Daniel tried to argue, but no one would listen. The trust he had carefully built over the years evaporated in seconds. He was powerless. Sophia's face turned white, realizing her schemes were undone. Later, Clara called Daniel into her private office. The tension was unbearable. Do you understand what you've done? She asked calmly. Daniel's voice was barely audible. I thought. I didn't know. Clara shook her head. You thought wrong. Love is not measured in what one can take. Loyalty is not proved through greed. You failed the test, Daniel. And now, you must face the consequences. He looked down, ashamed. The man who once ruled her home like a king now felt the weight of every deceitful action he had taken. Sophia tried to escape, but Clara stopped her. You're not going anywhere, Clara said firmly. Your role in this ends now. You wanted power without earning it. You lied, you cheated, and you thought I would never see. Sophia's head bowed. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Clara's face softened just slightly. Regret is not the same as justice. You will leave, and you will never return. With that, Sophia was escorted out, leaving a silence that echoed through the house. With Daniel and Sophia removed from her life, Clara turned her attention to rebuilding the company. She met her staff, reassured her investors, and personally oversaw every key decision. Her empire, once threatened by betrayal, now stood stronger than ever. The lesson was clear: vigilance and patience were as important as courage and intelligence. Even her employees, inspired by her strength, felt a renewed loyalty, not to wealth, but to the woman who led with wisdom and heart. Alone that night, Clara reflected on what had happened. Love, she realized, was not about tests or illusions. It was about trust, honesty, and respect. She had uncovered betrayal not just to punish, but to understand the true value of loyalty. And while she had won the battle, she understood that true love, and true leadership, was a lifelong pursuit, one that required constant awareness and care.